So coming up on Author's Corner, a conversation with Sean Curley. Wow, his road to becoming a writer is so fascinating to me. And I think you'll find the same thing if you can think it, if you have the ability, and if you just, use a little elbow grease, you can get there. And he definitely has done that. I am such a fan of sci-fi. You all know that. I didn't originally start that way, but I got pulled into sci-fi. He's written something that I think does that to you. It pulls you in. There's the overs and the unders. There's the cultures that collide, which he'll explain when we talk to him about it. And it's that struggle, and it's that struggle for survival. And then there is the use of artificial intelligence, something that all of us are thinking about and talking about a lot lately. So on America Tonight here on Author's Corner with me, Kate Delaney, Sean Curley, thanks for coming on. Tell us more about the book.
It's a kind of near-term post-apocalyptic story, if you will, but it's what you would call soft science fiction, meaning there's romance and a story behind it, but it's in the backdrop of some interesting technology that changes society.
What drove you to write this? Because you've written a couple of different books. What was it that propelled you in this direction?
This one was prompted from an article from Scientific American that talked about the possibility of humans becoming immortal within the next 20 to 30 years, that there's a reasonable likelihood that may happen. And I started pondering, what would that mean to society? Because obviously they couldn't make everybody immortal. The world's having a hard time handling how many people we have today. If everybody became immortal, it really wouldn't be able to keep up. So my thinking went to the top 1% and the problems we have with the separation of that, the rich and everybody else. And it would just make that worse. So it would exacerbate the problem of the separation of the 1%, because those were likely to be the ones that become immortal, the ones that have the money for it or have some super special skill that the immortals would need. And that would drive society apart. And I started realizing it could be a huge problem for the world in having this massive separation between a small group of people that would ultimately probably control the planet or the society, and everybody else who has to fall in line. And so I took that and turned it into an actual novel about what we call the overs. In the book, they're called overs, and everybody else is called unders. And I took the story and turned it into a love affair between a young over of 50 years old and an under who is the head of a rebel group trying to overthrow these overs, which complicates things and is part of the story.
I love thinking how easy that is for people to grasp, that the over and the unders. It's like I always say, it's like teams, right? You and me, them and us. I love that.
The
concept.
Yeah, the conflict between good and evil and all that, and right and wrong is always a prominent recipe for a story, if you will.
Yeah. So what's it like in this world? What you take us in a couple of different directions. Describe that for us a little bit as we dive into the book.
So it's about 100 years from now, and the world's gone through horrible times. It's not apocalyptic in terms of the end of the race, but massive population lowering, territorial wars, resource problems, bees dying out that cause all kinds of environmental problems, global warming causing all kinds of environmental problems. And in fact, it comes up that Los Angeles was nuked at one point during one of these mini wars. And so the planet's gone through horrible times, and it's trying to come out of that. The overs are trying to manage the world with the help of an artificial intelligence, and trying to get the planet and society back on a reasonable track. And so it's starting to get better. Denver is some of it's based in Denver, and Denver didn't experience some of the horrible things that some other places did, so it's a little better off. And so it tends to be the headquarters for the overs in the Americas, and they are trying to get the world better off, but of course they're doing it by control, and that's others don't like that.
When you
it's go ahead.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So when you put these together, are you just visualizing this? Once you get into the meat of it, Are the characters, the whole ideas, do they just come to life for you?
Oh, they do. And there's James is the under who is trying to overthrow the overs, and he's a prominent figure in the book. And Annika, who is the over who he falls in love with, are two of the most prominent people. And some difficult things happen in the book, and I reread it today, and I get sad at some of the parts, which is good. I get emotional about it. So they do come to life. You definitely want them to succeed. But you don't know how they're going to succeed. You don't know where the overs are taking this, where the artificial intelligence is trying to drive it, and you don't know exactly what's going to happen to the unders involved either.
Yeah. So it's so interesting to me. Were you always a fan of like science fiction?
Always, always. And in fact, the two biggest things I read are science fiction and historical fiction. My other book is historical fiction, so it's probably why I wrote in this genre. But yeah, I read all the classics growing up, Asimov and all of those. So Orson Scott Card is probably one of my favorites. So yeah, I definitely read a lot of science fiction growing up.
And your background is so interesting because people always wonder about that, people who are listening. And of course, we're talking to Sean Curley about his book, the specific one, Over, which is a science fiction novel. That's what we're discussing. And your background's interesting because you had a background in computer science, philosophy, management, space studies, and then you went to creative writing. So I would say it's like you were going down this path and maybe you didn't even know it.
Yeah, I did. My father was a writer somewhat, and he was much better at English than I ever was, and so I didn't think about it necessarily when I was young. I was very science oriented. I did go to college for computer science and philosophy, and when I wrote my first book, I struggled with it. It was hard. I mean, it's not an easy thing to overcome the fear of writing and actually get a novel completed. And my first novel, when I put it out there for people to review, I thought it was really well done, and I took it to this book club that read these types of books, and it was in in Denver where I lived at the time. And the first comment I got back was from somebody that I had printed it out, and they threw the book on the center of this circle that we were at and said, "This is the worst piece of crap I've ever read." And that was my introduction to reviews after finishing a novel. But it struck home because when we finished the conversation, I could see some of what they meant, and I decided I needed to step back and improve my craft. And so I went to University of Denver and got a graduate degree in creative writing, which kind of gave me a good breadth of knowledge about writing. And then I went and rewrote that book, and it's since won awards. Over has won awards as well. So that was my kind of introduction to writing. But yeah, it's hard to as anybody that kind of doesn't grow up writing to decide to write a novel and then actually go finish it and get it published and have people like it. It's a tough process.
It is a tough process. So for you saying that and knowing it's out there in the world and you're excited about it and you took those extra lengths to getting even better at it, what do you hope people take away from reading this novel?
Uh, Both a warning and hope. So part of it is we are, as a society, going down a couple of paths that are risky. One is we're going further and further into this separation of the top 1%, which is risky from a societal standpoint and tends to cause rebellions and upheavals. And the artificial intelligence route. I mean, people are starting to see that that's happening, and some people are starting to get scared about it. So artificial intelligence can be both an incredibly powerful tool for our race and for individuals in it, but it can also be incredibly dangerous. And so there's a bit of a warning in there and it allows people in a kind of fictional world to see what could that be like in the future, what might happen. But moreover, it's about hope. It's about people trying to make things better, people working hard at improving the lot, not just of themselves or their family or their local community, but of the world and of the race. And with that hope comes outcome eventually. With enough people trying hard to make it better, we can get to the point where we become a better society for everybody. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of hope involved in it as well.
All right, the name of the book is Over. You can pick it up on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. We look forward to the sequel, which I know you're working on too. So thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, much appreciated. I really enjoyed this time. Thank you.